colors show up. Well, anyway, thank you for inviting me to have an opportunity to present some of my work and my thinking. It's great. I'm really just at the beginning. If you haven't met me yet, I'm from Canada, and I received a Master's of Architecture degree there, and then for a number of years I was working in practice, but mostly doing urban design projects. And over the last 9 years or so, I've been teaching at the university there in Manitoba. Over the years, I've become more and more interested in urban design, and also in ways in which the sciences can sort of inform how we think about design and architecture. So I am just at the beginning of my PhD research. I'm working with Stephen and with Yuval Portugali, and I'm still just in the process of sort of formulating exactly the specificities of the PhD research that I'm going to do. There was just the conference here at Delft on self-organization in the city, and as I said in the poster, I'm curious about how do we move onwards into bringing these ideas about self-organization and complexity into the practice somehow in the city. So, okay. So just, the color is awful. Sorry. So ignore the color. It's not some statement I'm trying to make. Because the space is definitely not a hot space. It's really a cold space. And we know these spaces. They're sort of part of
the next word without awesome.
What's that?
The future without awesome.
That's right. The future without some sort of disaster. And you can see just two people walking in the corners there. And this sort of work is kind of a legacy that we see in many cities, particularly for me coming from North America, of these sort of master planning tabula rasa projects that we all sort of are aware now that this is not making good cities. But this question is, if these master planning strategies aren't working well, then what is the alternative, and how do we move from this top-down planning to these bottom-up processes? So there's a lot of discussion about that, I think, here in Europe, perhaps more so here than what we're getting in North America. I just want to say with this one that this also reflects a kind of way of thinking about space and form, which I think is based on a kind of scientific Newtonian paradigm that is trying to understand things in terms of being objects, and you try to make these objects very efficient, and you maximize relationships, and you try to control all the parameters. So this way of thinking, I think, is coming from a sort of scientific world view based on this sort of Newtonian reductionist paradigm. And within this paradigm, if you're, really, I wish you could see it. Oh no, and it's terrible because I don't have text either. I'm going to hold this up just because it should say, right over here, which is missing, it should say 5 objects, yeah? And it's really prettier on this laptop here. Anyway, it should say 5 objects because this is the way of thinking. You look at that and you say, what do you see? What is it that you're looking at? And so there's this idea that you're looking at 5 fingers. You think about it in terms of objects. So Gregory Bateson, an anthropologist, but also someone involved in the early cybernetics movement, said, instead of thinking about things this way, what if we change our lens? So what if we think about it not in terms of you seeing 5 objects, but in terms of seeing 4 relationships? And this gives you a different new lens for looking at what the same problem might be, or what the same entity might be. And you start to think about things in a slightly different way. So I'm very curious about how we could look at design in the city, thinking less about these objects and thinking more about relationships and process. So, why complexity theory? Because I'm interested in studying relationships and processes, I'm interested in finding some kind of a methodology that allows me to do this. Because when I was doing my master's work, I was also thinking about processes and relationships and moving away from thinking about the city as an object. And I was reading a lot about quantum physics and how quantum physics was talking about entities being defined according to their relationships and not according to their object properties. But I did not have a methodology for really getting at this way processes are structured. And in the last 15 years or so, the study of complex adaptive systems has started to provide tools for those interested in studying relationships to give them a kind of a handle on what this involves. So, I think complexity theory gives us this new analytical lens to help us understand systems that involve processes and relationships. Now, I am not sure how well people here know about complex adaptive systems theory. My sense is that here in Europe, people know a lot more about it than where I'm coming from in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, where if I say I'm interested in urbanism and complexity, people scratch their heads. And when I say, oh, I'm interested in complexity, here people go, oh yes, but we've been talking about this already for 10, 15 years. So it's really strange. I didn't come to it because it's some sort of trendy thing that everybody is talking about. Really in Canada, where I'm at my university, nobody is talking about this. But anyway, if you're not familiar with the terminology, complex adaptive systems are systems that are open. They are systems, so they have more relations happening internally within the system. There is a kind of boundary, but it's an open boundary. So there can be energy, there can be information that flows through this. It's dissipative. So this is sort of a difference because it's not a closed system that falls into some kind of equilibrium patterns. They operate far from equilibrium, so they're not settling into static parameters, but have very dynamic parameters. They display emergent features, which cannot be predicted from the parts. They are scale-free systems. They're also called self-organized criticality, which means that if you're looking at the system at any level of magnification, you see the same kinds of structures. So this is also talked about in terms of fractals or power law distributions. So, and they are nonlinear, which means that a small input into the system can generate a large sort of cascading spin-off effect because of feedback loops. So you never know what small impact is going to trigger some sort of large-scale effect. And then at the bottom I have, it's consistent with what we think of as life. So this is kind of a, I guess, a philosophical judgment that I'm making on these systems, that they seem to display kind of life-like properties, not associated with either very static systems or completely random systems. They have this kind of organic, integrated, lifelike quality that is derived partially from the way they're organized. So I'm interested in complexity theory because I think that cities qualify as this type of system as well. That they are an entity, but they are still open to information. They can have these nonlinear effects. They are far from equilibrium. And ideally, they will have lifelike qualities, although as designers, we're not always able to artificially achieve this. Okay, so again, I don't want to go too much into complexity theory itself. I just want to give you a couple of key notions from it. If you're interested, there are a lot of great books out there, and you may already be familiar with all of this, so I hope I'm not repeating concepts that are completely evident already. But some examples of complex systems and some features of complex systems. Complex systems, they share some structural features, but these can be manifested in many different kinds of environments. So the internet is an example of a complex system, but an ant colony is also an example of a complex system. And the internet is able to self-organize and is able to have sort of hierarchical distributions and is able to allow information flow to occur. It's the same thing with an ant colony, through chemical signals, through the interactions of individual ants communicating only with their local neighborhood, with their local neighbors. They are able to exhibit emergent behaviors and work efficiently within their environment.